So I think I'll just start by saying I am Tricia Ebner, and I am a teacher and a teacher leader and a coordinator here in Northeast Ohio. I live in Wadsworth, which is a small town near Akron, Ohio, and I work with school districts across 3 different counties at the moment. Not this exact moment, but on a day-to-day basis, that's what I'm doing. So when I look at a lot of what I'm going to share is going to sound really similar to what Karen said. And before I get too much further, my son is 12, so he really does know better than to bother mom at moments like this. But I'm hearing a lot of racket, and you may hear my dogs barking and all that in the background. So I'm just going to apologize straight up, because I'm not sure what's going on upstairs, but it's not as quiet as it often is. So I don't know what's tonight. So when I was thinking about my teacher leadership journey, first of all, I still get a little baffled when people look at me and call me a teacher leader, because I don't feel like I'm doing anything other than what I should be doing, which is teaching and helping kids learn and grow. And I kind of view that as also helping my colleagues help their kids learn and grow, because that's really, we're all here for the sake of kids, and that's really what this is all about. But when I do think back on it, some of this started for me when I became a mentor. I knew after I taught for a few years that I really did want to help other new teachers have a good positive start in the field like what I had had. And I did not have a formal mentoring program. When I was hired in Indiana, there was not a mandate for a mentoring program, but my principal connected me with a veteran teacher who was phenomenal. And this was back before we had computers in our classrooms and all of that. So we kept a spiral notebook in my mailbox in the main office. And when I needed to get her feedback on something, because she and I had completely separate planning times, I'd just write and stick it in her mailbox. And later in the day or the next morning, that spiral notebook would be back in my mailbox with a note. And sometimes she would pop in to my room just to see what was going on. And later in the day, that spiral notebook would be back in my mailbox with some observations she had or some questions for me. So that's how we did a lot of our collaborating. And she was a huge help to me. I think probably what really, there were a couple little things along the way that really sparked it. But what really got me fired up was in my state in 2011, we elected a governor who had said pretty strongly he was not really a big fan of public education or police or firefighters or anything like that. And so long story short, we had this thing in Ohio called Senate Bill 5, which was decimating salaries and benefits and all kinds of things for public employees. And it went through our legislature at lightning speed, and he signed it into law 2 months after he was inaugurated. And I mean, it was going to take my salary and cut it in half. It was going to be decimating for all kinds of things in Ohio. And yes, my pup is jealous of screen time. Anyway, he, or maybe that was Tricia Caliento. I'm sorry, Tricia. So anyway, I became part of a team to collect signatures, because if we got enough signatures on petitions, we could put that issue on the ballot for a public referendum. And so that's what we started out to do. And that was part of the Ohio Education Association, the Ohio Federation of Teachers. All of those organizations were working on that. And so that's what we really worked to do. And I have not really been a big activist until that point in time, that it was becoming really clear that people needed to step up and do something. And there were not a lot of people in my district that were doing that. Actually, no one in my district was willing to pass petitions around. And so I was like, fine, I will do it. I will get the training. I will take care of it. And we did succeed in repealing that particular issue. So that was a very, very good thing. Eric, that's a great question. I don't know that it was fear of retaliation. I think the district that I worked in was very much we like to fly under the radar and not draw lots of attention to ourselves. And fairly conservative community. So the community itself was very supportive of that governor. And that makes it a little bit hard. The community I live in also tends to be fairly supportive of a more conservative political mindset. So sometimes that can be a little bit of a challenge. So anyway, after Senate Bill 5, I started speaking up a little bit more, and I became a member of the executive team of our association and started asking some different questions and whatnot. And a couple of years after that, my coordinator, my gifted coordinator, came to me and said, hey, there's this thing that the state's looking for people to serve in this group, and our curriculum director thinks you might be a good fit, but I didn't know if you'd be interested in it. What do you think? And I guess that's probably one of the points I wanted to share with you is you never know what one yes will lead to, because that one yes probably launched me to where I am today. So I said, yes, I would be interested in that. So he recommended me, send in some information. And the next thing I knew, I was on Ohio's educator leader cadre, which was part of PARC, if you're familiar with PARC. Here in Ohio, PARC became a 4-letter word about 2 years after that. But at the time it wasn't. And so I was one of 3 or 4 teachers on that team of about 20 people. The other people on that team included different coordinators, curriculum directors. We had a couple superintendents. We had those kinds of people. But it was really interesting that there were a lot of different things that would come up, not just around PARC and assessments, but around other issues that were going on in education in Ohio. And sometimes those of us teachers in that group would be the ones to say, I don't think you understand why this is stressing teachers out so much. And we had people from the Department of Education who were listening to those conversations and taking that back to the leadership at ODE too. Because sometimes they truly didn't think that a whole change in the teacher evaluation system and a new assessment system and all of new standards, that was going to stress people out. I'm not sure why that didn't occur to some people. I don't think it did. So from there, because of the experiences I had with PARC, I got connected in with a whole lot of other groups. One of the things that I was really apprehensive about is, as a member of that leadership cadre, we were expected to provide professional development, not just within our own district. That I had been doing, but they also expected us to be doing that with districts in our region and eventually at statewide conferences. And so that's what I did. And it took a lot of taking a deep breath and practicing with some people that I trusted and knew on the educator leader cadre, but I started doing those things. And about 1.5 years after I became part of that team, I was at a conference in Chicago with a group called Student Achievement Partners. Maybe some of you have heard of them. And so there was something about that conference. I don't know what in the world led me to do this. This is not like me, but I did it. I went up to one of the leaders in that organization and I said, if you ever need anyone to present on some of these things that you've shared at a national level conference, that's my next challenge. I want to present at a national level conference. Again, not me, I don't usually go like that. They called me about 3 months later and said, we need someone at Teach and Lead, which was the national board conference. And so would you be interested in going? So I found myself as part of a panel discussion with Student Achievement Partners at Teach and Lead in Washington, D.C. And so that was 2 years I got to do that. And through those experiences, I just made more connections, more opportunities. That's how I met Nancy and some of the other people here, Wendy. It's just because of that one yes, and then saying yes to some additional things that came along. Would you be interested in? Would you be interested in? So I think there is a trick to this whole thing, and it's that I can't constantly say yes. That's sometimes something I'm learning yet. One of the things that I did say yes to that was pretty powerful for me, personally as well as professionally, is I was asked to co-chair our Standards Revision Advisory Committee with the state in 2016. So in the spring of 2016, another language arts teacher from here in Northeast Ohio and I became the 2 co-chairs. She took on kind of primary responsibility for K through 5, and I had 6 through 12. And we led a group of about 30 people in reviewing every single public comment that came in on Ohio's learning standards, which at that time, quite honestly, were Common Core. We had just renamed them because of the political issues going on. And so we looked at every single public comment, we commiserated, collaborated, tried to come to consensus on those, made recommendations for revisions. We sent those to the working group. The working group made the changes, sent them back to us, and we would make further suggestions, refinements. It all went back out for an additional round of public feedback in draft form. And then we had another round of revisions. And what happened ultimately from that is she and I both needed to present to the education committees of the House and the Senate here in Ohio, and the State Board of Education. So I found myself presenting I had the State Board of Education because she couldn't do that one. And I had the Senate Education Committee, which I thought was, they threw a couple of questions my way that were a little intimidating, but I had softballs compared to what she faced with the House Education Committee in terms of making those revisions and getting those approved. So it's really been, for me, my journey has really been a matter of saying yes, but in careful ways and in ways that reflect my priorities and my values. And the question I always try to ask myself is, how is this work going to benefit kids ultimately? If it's not going to benefit kids, then this probably isn't where I need to be putting my energy. And I don't keep that I take that in kind of a broad sense, because if I'm supporting teachers, then I'm supporting kids. And I could very well be supporting even more kids than I might be supporting if that were me by myself. So a lot of the work that I'm doing today, I do work with kids. I work with not as many kids as I used to, but I'm working with kids in enrichment kinds of settings. And then a lot of my time is spent supporting teachers, providing professional development, doing some one-to-one coaching, planning, all kinds of things like that. So in terms of balance, one of my big things was when my son was younger, bedtime was early. So that was a big plus for me. Like, he'd be in bed by 7 o'clock, and then, you know, mom could be teacher leader or whatever from 7 until bedtime. My days was not a whole lot different from Karen's. I was usually up at 4:30. These days, sometimes I'm up at 4:30, sometimes it's 5:30. But it's really maximizing the most of my time when I can. Some days I'm driving an hour to get to wherever I need to be, so that time I've got the hands-free phone in my car now, so there's phone calls going on during that time. And then also learning when to unplug and when to say no.